President Trump's trade war with American allies. Tariffs on imported goods are now at their highest levels since the Great Depression. Products from Mexico and Canada are exempt from those duties if and only if they comply with the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. Otherwise, Mexican imports face 25% tariffs, while Canadian goods face 35%.
Every year, an impressive $3.9 billion worth of nickel is mined in Canada and transported south across the border into Detroit, Michigan. This supply of Canadian nickel quietly fuels a crucial part of America's electric vehicle EV ambitions. Nickel is a key ingredient in the batteries that power EVs, and the corridor from Sudbury, Ontario to Detroit has long been the backbone of this cross-border battery supply chain. It's an economic artery that supports thousands of jobs, drives innovation, and helps both countries progress toward a cleaner, greener future. For decades, this nickel trade has operated smoothly, reflecting a strong and mutually beneficial partnership between Canada and the United States, two neighbors who not only share geography but also intertwined economies and cultural ties. Together, they've built what many call the Battery Belt, a region central to the production of the next generation of clean vehicles. This partnership has allowed the U.S. to rely on high-quality Canadian nickel, produced using relatively low-emission hydroelectric power, giving American EVs a competitive edge both economically and environmentally. However, recent changes in U.S. trade policy have shaken this long-standing relationship. In August, the White House implemented a significant tariff up to 30% on electric vehicle components, including critical minerals like nickel. While these tariffs were initially positioned as a tool to protect American jobs and industries from foreign competition, especially from China, they have had unintended consequences for Canada, America's closest ally and trading partner. Rather than receiving an exemption, Canadian nickel was caught in the crossfire, facing the same punitive duties as metals from other countries. The immediate effect of this tariff has been to increase the cost of manufacturing EV batteries in the U.S. Significantly, the typical 8.6 kilowatt-hour battery pack used in many SUVs requires roughly 38 kilograms of nickel, which makes up around 80% of the cathode material. With nickel prices hovering around $20,000 per ton, this means the tariff adds approximately $230 or more to the cost of each battery pack. Such price increases erode the profit margins for American automakers and threaten to push EV prices higher for consumers, potentially slowing the transition to electric vehicles that the government has prioritized. The consequences go beyond economics. The tariff creates uncertainty and supply chain disruptions that can discourage investment in U.S. battery plants, many of which depend heavily on the steady flow of Canadian nickel. Major companies like General Motors have already adjusted their production forecasts downward, citing these increased costs as a significant factor. The ripple effects are felt not only by manufacturers but also by workers and consumers who face higher prices and fewer affordable EV options. Canada's response, though measured, signals a strategic recalibration. Rather than engaging in public confrontations or retaliatory threats, the Canadian government has quietly but decisively adjusted its trade policies to protect its nickel industry. Ottawa introduced a 15% export tax on raw nickel, targeting manufacturers who had previously benefited from duty-free access to Canadian materials. Additionally, Canada implemented a carbon tracking mechanism to favor low-emission nickel production, originating in Ontario, where hydroelectric power and electrolysis technologies keep the carbon footprint low. Beyond taxes and regulations, Canada is investing heavily in domestic battery technology development, particularly along the Quebec-Ontario corridor. This includes support for lithium iron phosphate, LFP batteries, which require less nickel and offer a cleaner production process. The country is also offering special tax incentives to anchor large battery cell plants, such as the Stellantis LG facility in Windsor, ensuring that more value-added battery manufacturing happens on Canadian soil. These strategic moves reflect a broader shift in Canada's approach to the global minerals market. With growing environmental regulations like the European Union's impending carbon border tax, which will levy charges based on the carbon intensity of imported materials, Canada's low-carbon nickel is positioned as a premium product. European and Asian markets, including South Korea and Germany, are increasingly turning to Canadian nickel, attracted by its cleaner environmental footprint and stable supply chains.
Well, first of all, I start off every interview with saying how much we love Americans, how much we love the U.S. And as I've said on this show many times, that a tariff on Canada is a tax on the American people. And as you've seen, the study from Yale, it's going to cost Americans $2,400.
This redirection of Canadian exports away from the United States represents a significant challenge for the American EV industry. While Washington builds tariff walls, allies abroad are opening new trade routes and securing mineral supplies that align with their climate goals. As a result, the U.S. is at risk of becoming more dependent on nickel from Indonesia and the Philippine sources with much higher carbon emissions and less sustainable mining practices. This is not only a setback for environmental progress, but also poses potential reputational and regulatory risks for American automakers aiming to compete globally. The current situation places the Biden administration at a crossroads. Policymakers must decide whether to maintain the tariffs and risk further damage to domestic EV manufacturing or seek a negotiated exemption for Canadian nickel. Such an exemption would preserve the long-established supply chain, help stabilize prices, and support American EV production goals. Alternatively, the U.S. could continue its hardline stance, prompting Canada to further restrict exports and deepen trade tensions, or it could pursue a middle ground with reduced tariffs and renewed cooperation on critical minerals. Each choice carries significant implications. Maintaining tariffs could slow EV adoption, reduce investment, and strain diplomatic ties with a key ally. Offering exemptions may require political compromise, but could foster stronger North American supply chains and accelerate clean technology development. The middle path offers a pragmatic solution, but depends heavily on diplomatic goodwill and coordination with global partners. Amid this uncertainty, the economic and environmental stakes have never been higher. The North American battery belt is a vital hub for clean transportation technology, and its health affects not only industry profits but also the ability to meet ambitious climate targets. Protecting this region's integrated supply chains while fostering innovation and sustainability should be a priority for policymakers. Ultimately, the story of Canadian nickel and U.S. tariffs reveals a complex intersection of trade, environmental policy, and geopolitics. What began as a tariff aimed at protecting American interests now threatens to undermine the very industries and climate goals it sought to defend. It highlights the importance of thoughtful, collaborative approaches to supply chain management in a rapidly evolving global economy. As Canada shifts its nickel exports toward Europe and Asia, the United States must carefully consider how to maintain its competitiveness in the global EV market without alienating its closest allies.
Absolutely, and we're doing it as we speak right now. We're onshoring manufacturing jobs that typically are American jobs. We have a market here that we can sustain it, and we're lowering taxes. We're making sure we're competitive for companies to come and invest in Canada. Ontario alone last year attracted over $40 billion of investment, creating more jobs, more opportunities. I would much rather, work with our greatest ally and closest friend and increase jobs in both countries, and we can do that. We'd be the two strongest nations in the world economically. That's our goal, but unfortunately, President Trump doesn't want to go down that avenue. He wants to hurt the American people, and that's exactly what he's doing.
The future of clean vehicles and the economic opportunities they represent depends on finding a path forward that balances protection with partnership. In this high-stakes game, nickel has emerged not just as a metal, but as a powerful bargaining chip, shaping diplomatic relations and industrial strategies across continents. The decisions made today will reverberate for years to come, defining who leads the clean energy revolution and who gets left behind.